I'm Janessa, and I'm still processing the fact that my family, the people who spent 30 years telling me I was a failure, a settled for less disappointment, just tried to steal the multi-million-dollar business they didn't even know existed. To get this, you absolutely need the history, because the conflict didn't start with their desperation, it started with their contempt for my choices. Picture the Price family world: polished, high net worth, corporate elite. My older sister, Savannah, was the golden child, the heir apparent to my father's ambitions. Northwestern business, corporate big shot, married to Miles, a hedge fund manager who wore a Patek Philippe that probably cost more than my entire annual income for a decade. Their life was a seamless, glittering display of performative success. They were the standard, the constant reminder of what a price should be. Me. I got an ag science degree, fell in love with a quiet, brilliant researcher named Vaughn, and we spent 3 grueling, joyful, and exhausting years bringing 80 acres of neglected soil back to life. It was a farm, yes, but to us, it was a living, breathing laboratory, dedicated to solving real problems like drought and soil degradation. To my family, however, it was just a mud patch. Their dismissal wasn't casual. It was a deeply ingrained, ritualistic part of our relationship. Every holiday, every phone call, every social gathering included a new variation of the same theme. Janessa chose the easy life. Janessa has no ambition. Janessa settled. Our wedding, 4 years ago, was the first real public, undeniable exhibition of this dynamic. We'd converted a beautiful, old dairy barn on the property, strung up hundreds of fairy lights, and used centerpieces made from wildflowers and experimental perennials we'd grown ourselves. Our heart and soul, literally. But the beauty was lost on them. The air was thick with their usual brand of backhanded compliments and strained politeness. My father, Gerald Price, a man who built an empire on his sheer force of will and a relentless need for control, tapped his knife against a crystal glass. Because even in a barn, standards, darling, he boomed, his voice carrying over the crowd. To my middle daughter, Janessa. She always chose the easy road in life. Playing in the dirt was enough ambition for a price. But we love her anyway. To the newlyweds, the easy road. I had spent 4 years earning a specialized university degree, 2 more gaining certifications, and 3 years of breaking, actual physical labor to revitalize soil that everyone else had given up on. Meanwhile, Savannah spent her time in air-conditioned skyscrapers, managing portfolios. The words hit me like a physical blow, igniting that familiar flush of shame, that pressure in my chest from a lifetime of being told I wasn't enough, that my worth was deficient, because I didn't chase the metrics they valued. Then Savannah, her diamond tennis bracelet, catching the light with every dismissive gesture, leaned across the table and whispered, loud enough for our entire section to hear. The mud lovers finally made it official. My hands started shaking. It was a joke to her, a casual cruelty meant to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy, permanently below her. Under the table, Vaughn's warm fingers found mine. Our private signal: anchor yourself. I focused on his steady presence, on the fact that he saw me, he saw the work, and he respected it. Your father means well, my mother, Marilyn, murmured to me later, her voice the automatic, unhelpful comfort she always offered. He just wants what's best. But what's best was always Savannah's life, never mine. I stared at our wildflower centerpieces. To them, they were just rustic decorations. To us, they represented the experimental crops and Vaughn's groundbreaking irrigation innovations that could truly revolutionize Midwestern farming. They saw muddy boots and calloused hands. They didn't see innovation, or purpose, or the kind of deep, meaningful work that connected us to the land, and to something bigger than ourselves. I realized then that their blindness was willful. They deliberately misunderstood Vaughn, a Stanford-educated man with specialized publications, treating him like some simple dirt farmer, because it was necessary to maintain their family mythology, with Savannah permanently enthroned as the success story. My parents weren't just disappointed, they were financially and emotionally invested in keeping me labeled as the failure. I finally stood up, champagne glass in hand, my voice clearer and steadier than I felt. I looked directly at Dad, at Savannah, at Miles. "I want to thank everyone for coming," I said. "Especially those who've supported us during the tough seasons, both in farming and in life." My voice grew stronger, fueled by years of silent rejection. "To all of you who believed in what we're building, thank you for seeing value where others saw only soil and dirt." Dad's practiced. Corporate smile tightened. The only outward sign that I had actually gotten through his armor. Savannah exchanged a surprised, almost angry glance with Miles. For the first time, I had publicly rejected their narrative that I'd settled for less, that my life was a lesser choice. "Proud of you," Vaughn whispered, pressing a kiss to my temple as I sat down. Those simple words filled a space their approval never could and never would. The evening ended with forced goodbyes, the Prices retreating to their gleaming cars, leaving us alone in our barn, which suddenly felt like a fortress of our own making. Fast forward 3 years. We've poured every dollar and every minute of free time into the farm, now formally structured as a research-intensive enterprise focused on climate, adaptive agriculture. We're not profitable yet in the traditional sense, as every spare resource goes straight back into R&D, but our results are phenomenal. Our experimental fields are producing drought-resistant strains, and Vaughn's precision irrigation system is proving its capability to cut water usage by nearly 40%. We're fielding discrete inquiries from universities and specialized agricultural journals. But at family gatherings, nothing changes. We're still subject to their familiar, wary dismissals. "That old farmhouse looks like it's one storm away from collapsing," Dad would say. "Those work clothes make you look like hired help," Mom would add, twisting the knife. She'd always cap it off with, "Your father just wants what's best for you, dear. Maybe you could take some business courses at the community college. Make something of myself." As if the scientific rigor of our work counted for nothing against the glittering, empty ambition of the corporate world. I finally realized the truth. They needed us to be struggling. They needed me to be perpetually seeking their approval, because that maintained their superior status and Savannah's golden glow. If I was succeeding on my own terms, their judgment and sacrifices for their own ambitions were meaningless. Then came the meeting on my parents' gleaming lakefront deck. The atmosphere was brittle. Savannah, as usual, was holding court, but her laughter was too loud, too desperate. Miles flashed his limited edition Patek Philippe at Vaughn, but the gesture felt like a reflex, not a genuine show of wealth. My father approached, the words automatic. "Savannah just secured 3 new client accounts worth over $30 million. Meanwhile, you're still playing in the dirt." It was a lie. I knew it instantly, a thin facade designed to cover the cracks I was starting to notice. A tap on my shoulder. My younger sister, Celeste, usually the family's quiet mediator, looked serious, her eyes wide with genuine fear. "I need to tell you something," she whispered, pulling me into the kitchen. "Miles has made some catastrophic investment mistakes." I set my plate down. "How bad?" "Bad enough they've listed the Cape Cod house. The yacht's for sale." Celeste glanced nervously toward the deck. "Savannah's terrified. Her perfect life is imploding." The true terror hit me next. "What about Mom and Dad?" Celeste's face confirmed my darkest fear. "Miles manages their retirement portfolio, has for years. The pieces locked into place with a horrifying clarity. Their entire system, the facade, the dismissals, the obsession with appearances, required Savannah's success. If she failed, the entire Price family financial structure collapsed, including my parents' security. She's desperate, Janessa," Celeste warned, gripping my arm. "Which makes her dangerous. Watch yourself. They'll be looking for solutions anywhere they can find them." I returned to the deck, seeing everything through this new, terrifying lens. The desperate edge to Savannah's laughter, the tight lines around Miles's eyes. When Dad mentioned their next cruise, Mom nervously clutching her pearls. The golden crown was slipping, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that the falling royal family would eventually turn their eyes toward the worthless 80 acres they'd always ridiculed, suddenly seeing it not as dirt, but as salvageable capital. Vaughn and I went home that night, not to sleep, but to begin preparing for the war we knew was coming. The confrontation wouldn't be about family, it would be about survival. The slow, grinding erosion of the Price family's prestige was visible in the increasing desperation, a process that accelerated immediately after Celeste's panicked warning, turning the golden cage into a crumbling edifice where the occupants were frantic to salvage anything they could. We had just returned from the lake house, and the knowledge that Miles had not just lost their own money, but had jeopardized Gerald and Marilyn's retirement was a seismic shock that shifted the foundations of our relationship with them forever. It was no longer about disapproval, but about financial survival, and we knew, with a terrifying clarity, that our mud patch was about to become a desperate target. Just a few weeks after Celeste's initial revelation, the pretense of normalcy completely evaporated, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife at a strained family dinner for Celeste's birthday, which lacked the usual expensive champagne and instead featured cheap, store-bought cake. My father, the man who once bragged about his quarterly bonuses, was conspicuously avoiding any conversation that steered toward the stock market or investment performance, while Savannah, who always maintained impeccable corporate poise, looked permanently stressed, her eyes shadowed, her designer clothes seeming less like armor and more like a costume. Passing the kitchen, the very air seemed to hum with disaster, and I heard Miles's voice, sharp and frantic. Buyers smell desperation. Gerald, I can't liquidate everything at a loss. But the accounts are frozen. The panic of the man who had bet everything and lost. And that's when I realized the family's wealth was built on a fragile foundation of leverage and sheer performance, not stability. It was in that moment, as Miles was venting his collapse, that Savannah cornered me near the pantry, the ultimate corporate ambush in the most domestic of settings. Gone was the polished executive. In her place was a woman with raw, unconcealed desperation in her eyes, a look that cut straight through the facade. She started with a pathetic, weak attempt at her usual condescension. So, Janessa, how's everything at the mud patch? Did the tractor break down again? Before quickly abandoning the act, I need your help, she admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Miles and I are repositioning some long-term investments, just a temporary cash flow problem, and we need a short-term loan of $20,000, just until the market rebounds. I leaned against the counter, suddenly feeling stronger, calmer, and more powerful than I had ever felt in her presence. I'm sorry, Savannah, I stated, my voice even and firm, but every cent we have is committed to reinvestment into our business right now. Her face contorted into an ugly, contemptuous snarl. Business. She laughed, a sharp, quick, and brittle sound of sheer arrogance. It's a farm, Janessa, not a hedge fund. This is family. You lend money to family when they need it. Yes, I agreed, meeting her furious gaze without flinching. The same family that spent years telling me I chose the easy road, that I needed real ambition, and that my life was playing in the dirt. Her mask completely dissolved, revealing the naked envy and resentment beneath. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Little Janessa finally has something Savannah needs. You've always been so spiteful. I refused the loan a final time, stating clearly that our capital was locked into Greenfield Agrotech's research projects, the mere sound of the corporate name seeming to confuse her further. And I watched her storm out, the power dynamic instantly and irrevocably inverted. That night, back at the farmhouse, the conversation was heavy. We knew the polite requests would stop, and the hostile maneuvering would begin. And we needed to protect the intellectual property and assets of the business they so conveniently dismissed. As I was compiling our utility bills and tax documents, Vaughn looked up from his laptop, his face serious, and slid a thick, worn leather portfolio across the table, the papers within looking far too official for our kitchen. There's something I need to show you, he said, his tone utterly devoid of his usual playful calm. It was a framed letterhead, Stanford University, and a doctorate of philosophy in advanced agricultural engineering. The degree you earned at Wisconsin State was your initial MS, he explained. But my doctorate wasn't in basic irrigation, Janessa. It was advanced algorithmic modeling for climate, adaptive agriculture, and the initial grants were funneled through the Stanford Research Foundation. Which is why your family never saw the papers or the school name. They were so busy interrupting and belittling. They never paused to listen. So I stopped correcting their harmful assumptions. The quiet man I married, brilliant but humble, was far more than anyone in my family, including me, had fully grasped, and my mind raced, recalculating our entire existence, realizing that the mud patch was not a hobby, but a deeply sophisticated research center. Vaughn then pulled out the final report, his expression solemn. "The farm isn't just a farm, Janessa," he said, pushing the valuation report forward. "It's the R&D headquarters for Greenfield Agrotech, a company currently valued by the consortium at $62 million. The number, printed in stark, precise Arial font, was absolutely stunning, the ultimate validation of our quiet choices against a lifetime of their loud, arrogant judgment, and the shock of the magnitude. $62 million left me speechless, my throat suddenly dry, the number dwarfing the pitiful $20,000 loan Savannah had begged for hours earlier. We were not just safe, we were a serious, valuable enterprise. My phone buzzed, vibrating violently on the table, breaking the incredible silence. It was Celeste, and her message was blunt emergency. "Call now. They know everything." I hit the call button, putting her on speakerphone. Miles cracked. Celeste whispered, her voice tight with panic. "He sold the truth to the developer, Peter Donovan, claiming the farm was our parents' collateral for their business loan. A complete lie, but they bought it. He told Dad the land could be appraised for over $1 million if it was sold for development, but that Donovan was prepared to close immediately to seize it before we had a chance to get weird with Janessa's hobby farm." Celeste paused, taking a ragged breath. "Janessa, they're preparing to stage an intervention. A professional, looking ambush tomorrow morning, with a doctor and their pastor. They're planning to pressure you into selling tomorrow morning. They think you're desperate enough to sell out of guilt and shame." Vaughn took my hand across the table, his grip steady and reassuring. His face was a mask of cold fury. "They think we're desperate enough to grab any lifeline," he observed, his voice a low rumble. "They've always seen you as the weak link, the one to pressure. But I was done being the weak link." My rage, sharp and precise, galvanized my mind. "They're bringing knives to a fight they don't know exists," I stated, the final, undeniable conviction settling over me. We spent the remaining hours until dawn finalizing our counter-attack, preparing the slide deck of Stanford credentials and the $62 million valuation. The corporate ambush was set, but they would be ambushing a sovereign nation. The morning of the planned ambush broke, cold and crisp, mirroring the brittle tension inside our old farmhouse, but the air was charged with a mixture of terror and exhilarating preparedness. A battle, ready calm settling over me that was completely new, and I realized I wasn't the intimidated little sister anymore, having spent the entire, sleepless night with Vaughn finalizing our defense, reviewing the Greenfield Agrotech financials, and rehearsing the single, unwavering word, no. Vaughn, who usually preferred the silent company of his algorithmic models, and the quiet hum of the lab, was the picture of corporate menace. His demeanor calm but his eyes razor sharp, ready to defend the company they thought was just a mortgage-backed lump of dirt, and right on schedule. Precisely at 900 a.m., the first vehicle, a gleaming black Mercedes S-Class, crunched up the gravel driveway, quickly followed by two more luxury SUVs, carrying the full cast of characters required for a calculated corporate coup, and a family intervention first, Savannah, emerging perfectly coiffed, but with a frantic edge to her movements, immediately followed by Miles, slick and sweating despite the cool air, clutching a thick, leather briefcase that undoubtedly contained the foreclosure documents and the meager cash offer, and finally, two stern, impeccably dressed strangers, Peter Donovan and his associate, representing the Heartland Investment Group, the cash buyer they'd lined up to snap up our research center for pennies on the dollar, followed moments later by the inevitable, imposing arrival of my parents, Gerald and Marilyn, driving my father's Lincoln Navigator, ready to maximize the social and emotional pressure, entering our home without a knock, the ultimate violation of boundaries signaling that in their eyes, our home was already their property. Savannah launched the operation immediately, her voice dripping with artificial concern. "We're here to help, Janessa, before things get any worse for you." Attempting to frame the predatory buy out as a benevolent family rescue, while Miles, treating our carefully restored dining table like a boardroom surface, spread out the colorful investment group papers, immediately launching into a well-rehearsed pitch filled with buzzwords about leveraging assets and repositioning for growth. But it was Miles's casual, dismissive tone that truly grated. "It's just Ekridge, Janessa," and Donovan's offering $1.1 million for the dirt, 40% over market value. "Take the win, sell the dirt, and we'll even give you and Vaughn real careers at my firm, managing acquisitions, minimizing my entire life's work, Vaughn's advanced research, my soil conservation breakthroughs, the years of physical and intellectual investment, into something worthless and disposable." Then, my father stepped forward, the corporate titan fully in command, sensing the deal was imminent and seeing the dollar signs he so desperately needed to shore up his disastrous retirement account, clapping his hands together with a booming, false cheer. "Now we're talking sense. We've made the necessary arrangements. Where do we sign?" The climax of their entire orchestration, the moment they expected us to crumble, to grab the lifeline, to fall back into the role of the eternally grateful, less successful daughter who needed their guidance. Vaughn, who had been listening in silence, stepped smoothly between Miles and the table, radiating a quiet, unshakable authority that stunned the corporate visitors into silence. "Thank you for the visit, Mr. Donovan," Vaughn began, his voice calm, measured, and dangerously articulate, "but we are not selling our property." The simple, declarative statement hung in the air, a shockwave in their carefully constructed ambush. Peter Donovan, the hardened investment group manager, visibly paused, his rehearsed smile faltering for the first time. "You're turning down $1.1 million for a patch of farmland, son?" he asked, attempting a condescending, folksy tone. "I understand the offer perfectly, Mr. Donovan," Vaughn replied, his gaze locked directly on the buyer, never blinking. "However, this isn't just farmland. This property is the primary R&D facility for Greenfield Agritech. We are currently conducting longitudinal studies on drought-resistant perennial grain crops utilizing modified root structures developed through my doctoral research at Stanford University." The mere mention of Stanford and Greenfield Agritech, a name they'd never heard and certainly never ridiculed, caused an instant, chaotic disturbance in the room. Savannah's perfect composure shattered, her voice shrill. "It's a farm, Vaughn! It has dirt and plants and tractors!" "Don't be dramatic." I finally stepped in, standing shoulder to shoulder with my husband, a unified front against a lifetime of disrespect. "Agricultural research requires all those things, Savannah, plus multi-million-dollar grant funding and intellectual property." My father's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson, but he quickly defaulted to his familiar, controlling rhetoric, trying to reclaim the narrative. "Janessa, the least you can do, after all your sister has done, is sit down and discuss the opportunity she arranged to save us, to save you, from certain financial ruin." "We have discussed it, Dad," I stated, the anger suppressed for years finally giving my voice an unexpected, rock-solid strength. "The answer is no. Our capital and our focus are entirely committed to our ongoing research. We are not selling." Miles, the consummate deal closer, made one final, sweaty, and desperate appeal, waving a manila folder. "I have a certified cashier's check here. We can close today, Janessa. Think of the stability." Vaughn calmly walked to the front door and opened it wide, the cool air flooding into the overheated room, a clear signal of dismissal. "We appreciate your time, but we've been clear about our position. The property is not for sale." The corporate buyers, realizing the futility of negotiating with two people who were not, in fact, desperate or ignorant, quickly gathered their briefcases and retreated to their cars, leaving the Price family isolated in our living room. My parents lingered, their bodies rigid with shock and betrayal. "You're making a tremendous mistake," Gerald warned, his voice low and vibrating with fury, but devoid of its usual power. "That's our decision to make," I replied, holding the door open, the sight of them standing exposed on the porch, their grand plan thwarted by the mud lovers, filling me with a quiet, profound satisfaction. I watched them drive away, but the final, theatrical act of their arrogance came an hour later. My mother called, her voice shaking, not with sorrow, but with cold, calculated cruelty. "I'm ashamed to have a daughter like you. You put dirt before family." Then, an hour after that, "Dad, we'll be back. You clearly aren't thinking straight, Janessa. This is a mental health crisis." They were coming back for an intervention, bringing in outside help. A final, despicable maneuver to use social pressure, shame, and perceived professional authority to strip us of our autonomy. And they did return, 2 days later. Not in just 3 cars, but 5, a full convoy rolling up our driveway, confirming Celeste's frantic warning. This was the true climax: Dad's massive Lincoln, Savannah's Range Rover, the addition of Pastor Thompson's black Cadillac, a man Dad had known for 20 years, and the unexpected, terrifying presence of a clinical professional, Dr. Wainwright, a family counselor recruited to officially diagnose and discredit my sanity. But they also brought an audience of 3 of our long-time, well, respected neighbors, Frank Olson, Mrs. Wilson, and the Abbotts, whom they had manipulated into showing up to support the family, maximizing the social pressure in a desperate attempt to force us into compliance, using our own community against us. Dad, dressed in his full corporate closing blazer, began the sham intervention, his voice laced with patronizing concern, claiming we were increasingly erratic for turning down a multi-million-dollar offer, conveniently forgetting to mention it was an opportunistic one. Savannah put on a display of manufactured tears, speaking of her concern for Janessa's fragile emotional state. Pastor Thompson stepped in, quoting the 5th commandment about honoring parents. Miles offered disastrous financial projections that had nothing to do with our business. Dr. Wainwright spoke in hushed, clinical tones about unhealthy coping mechanisms and asset denial. The attack was perfectly coordinated, a multi-layered assault designed to make me doubt my own reality. Vaughn stepped forward then, his hand squeezing mine, our anchor one last time before he delivered the knockout blow. "I apologize to our guests, to Pastor Thompson, and to Dr. Wainwright, who have clearly been brought here under false pretenses." He turned his large, military, grade tablet to face the assembled audience, his voice ringing with indisputable truth and technical confidence. "This is my doctoral degree in agricultural engineering from Stanford University. These are the patents I hold on precision irrigation systems, the ones that cut water use by 40%. The sheer weight of the prestigious name and the patents immediately silenced the room. The murmurs started, growing louder. He swiped again, displaying a meticulously organized slide deck. "The farm is not a hobby. It is the research headquarters of Greenfield Agrotech, a company currently valued at $62 million for its IP portfolio in climate, adaptive food systems." The silence this time was absolute, heavy, shattered only by Mrs. Wilson's audible gasp. And finally, Vaughn concluded, with the dramatic timing of a man who had waited years for this moment. "This is the approval letter for a federal research grant of $3.5 million for our perennial grain crop development, classifying this entire property as critical national agricultural infrastructure." Dr. Wainwright, the professional accomplice, backed away from my father, her face turning crimson with professional embarrassment. Pastor Thompson looked at Gerald with narrowed, accusatory eyes. "Gerald, did you know about this multi-million-dollar company and the Stanford doctorate when you asked me to speak with your daughter about family duty?" My father, finally defeated and exposed, stood frozen, his jaw working silently, the corporate mask completely gone. Savannah made one final, desperate lunge for control. "This only means Janessa and Vaughn are more capable of helping our family now." "Dad!" "Concede, Jan. It's time?" That was my cue. I finally stepped forward, the fear and doubt completely replaced by a powerful, righteous calm. "For 32 years. I began, looking first at my mother, then at my father. My voice clear and utterly devoid of its old fear. "I've listened to you dismiss my life, belittle my degree as playing in dirt, and measure my worth only against Savannah's corporate ambition. You valued a paydeck Philip over solving the crisis of global food security. This farm, this company, this innovation is ours, built without a dollar of family support, and, frankly, without a single word of encouragement from any of you. Miles, defeated beyond any hope of recovery, attempted one last professional maneuver. Perhaps we could still discuss some mutually beneficial investment opportunities. Janessa. I cut him off instantly, firmly, with an expression of pure, unadulterated refusal. No, Miles, keep your dignity. Know your limits. The finality in my voice silenced him entirely. The audience, the neighbors, the doctor, the pastor, now completely aligned with us, began to disperse, offering awkward apologies to us as they passed. Celeste walked directly from her car to stand beside us, her face glowing with quiet pride. I chose, she told our mother softly, her allegiance clear. We watched the convoy retreat, my father's imposing posture broken. Savannah's tears real this time, the golden empire crumbling under the weight of its own contempt. Vaughan's arm slid around my waist, his presence a solid comfort. It's really over, isn't it? I asked, looking at the silent, beautiful fields. This part is, Vaughn answered. What comes next is entirely up to us. The adrenaline from the showdown hadn't completely worn off, but the morning after their failed ambush, a powerful, quiet calm settled over the Greenfield Agritech farm, replacing the years of suppressed anxiety with a palpable sense of peace and absolute ownership. We watched the sun rise over our fields, no longer seeing them as the mud patch they'd ridiculed, but as the critical national infrastructure the federal grant application had called them. Just after a quick, emotionally exhausted breakfast, a government vehicle, a simple, unmarked sedan, rolled up our drive, a stark contrast to the black Lincolns and Range Rovers of the day before. Linda Morales, a senior official from the USDA Research Division, emerged, carrying a thick folder and a genuinely warm smile. In our kitchen, now a place of vindication rather than ambush, she slid the folder across the table, its contents radiating official success. The drought-resistant grain project has been approved for full funding, $3.5 million over 4 years, with priority designation as critical agricultural infrastructure. She confirmed, the words resonating with the weight of official recognition and financial security. She confirmed the preliminary yields that Vaughan's algorithms had predicted were unprecedented. Our experimental perennial wheat strains were showing 38% less water consumption compared to standard annual varieties, with only a marginal 4% reduction in overall harvest volume. A technological and scientific feat that fundamentally challenged the established agricultural practices my family had never bothered to understand. Federal recognition of our life's work sat on our kitchen table, right beside yesterday's coffee cups. By mid-morning, the isolation my parents had cultivated around us began to dissolve, replaced by a surge of genuine community support. Our neighbors, the same ones my family had manipulated, began to arrive, bearing covered dishes and sincere congratulations. Frank Olson, whose family had farmed the adjacent land for 4 generations, was the first. He brought his famous apple pie, and a handshake that was both firm and apologetic. Heard about the grant, Vaughn? And about the, well, situation? He said, shaking his head. About time somebody recognized what you two are doing here. My father-in-law's worried sick about next year's water table. The farmhouse, previously the site of a hostile corporate takeover attempt, became an impromptu celebration, a testament to the community's quiet respect for hard work and innovation over showy wealth. As the last of the neighbors were leaving, a small, unassuming sedan pulled up. Celeste stepped out, not with a casserole, but with a small suitcase and a look of quiet resolve. I quit, she announced, walking directly into the living room. Savannah called this morning, demanding I choose a side, warning me I'd be ruining my reputation if I didn't testify that you were emotionally unstable. I told her I already chose, and I'm tired of defending that collapsing fantasy. Celeste's decision was the final, critical realignment of our family unit. That evening, as the sun began to set, Vaughn offered her a proposal. We're expanding, Celeste. We need someone who understands legal structures and corporate finance, but who is aligned with our mission. The guest house has good bones, And there's room for an office if you wanted to look into agricultural law and IP defense. You'd let me stay, after all this? She asked, her voice tight with surprise. Family supports family, I said simply, putting my hand on her shoulder. Real family. 6 months later, the transformation of the farm was complete and exhilarating. I led a group of USDA and state officials on a tour of our expanded facility. 3 new, gleaming greenhouses stood where the old rusty silo had been, powered by new solar panels Vaughn had installed. My voice was clear and confident as I explained the mechanics of the modified root sensing irrigation system, completely unlike the hesitant, shrinking woman who once feared her father's gaze. The shame and doubt were gone, replaced by the indisputable confidence of genuine expertise. Vaughn worked in the new monitoring station, his genius no longer confined to the dusty study, but integrated into a professional, collaborative environment. His Rural Development Award and the framed Stanford diploma hung proudly on the wall. No longer a defense mechanism, but a simple statement of fact. Celeste was in the conference room, deep in conversation with a sustainable farming coalition. Her legal expertise was invaluable for navigating the complex international patent applications for the perennial grains, and she was thriving. Her professional skill finally being used for meaningful work, instead of shuffling papers for a doomed hedge fund. The transformation in her was as profound as my own. That afternoon, I met with a group of young women from the university's agricultural mentorship program, guiding these future scientists through the complex soil concepts and water conservation strategies. This was the true legacy. We were building partnership, mentorship, and tangible change. Vaughn watched from a distance with quiet pride. The true meaning of the word. Later, as the evening settled in, a neighbor stopped by, raising his glass on our patio overlooking the fields. To innovation that serves the land rather than exploiting it, he declared. Celeste handed me an envelope. A thin, formal letter from Tampa, Florida. It was a brief update from Savannah, informing us that the family had sold everything they could and relocated. Miles was working an entry-level position at a regional firm, and my father was taking on consulting work. Savannah's words revealed a complex mixture of manufactured pride and real, gnawing uncertainty. They never saw the value of what was right in front of them. Celeste observed, watching the sunset paint our experimental fields a brilliant, hopeful gold. Vaughn joined us, his arms slipping around my waist. One seed at a time will change the world, he whispered, his vision completely realized in the land around us. I folded the letter. The true harvest of our work wasn't measured in a corporate valuation, or in the number of prestigious clients, but in sustainability, in the strength of the soil, and in the community we had built. Looking across our land, the same acres my family dismissed as worthless dirt, I finally understood the profound truth. The real harvest isn't what we grow in the soil, but the unshakable integrity we cultivate in ourselves when we finally stop seeking approval from those who are incapable of giving it.